You can hear me okay now. This is Patrick Hagan with the Entrust Group, and you joined us today for a webinar on how to open a self-directed IRA. I appreciate you taking the time to join us today. This is an interactive webinar where you can type in questions and I can provide answers to those questions. So feel free to use the chat box. It's in the bottom left corner of your screen. Those chat comments go directly to me, and I'd be happy to answer questions either throughout the presentation, and I'll certainly leave some time at the end of the presentation as well. Today's topic is pretty simple. It's how to open a self-directed IRA. This is something that is really simple, but a lot of times people get a little bit confused on the mechanics of what is a self-directed IRA, how is it different from what I currently have, and how do I move forward if I want to do something in the way of an alternative asset, something like real estate or private placements or private notes. How does that work within a retirement plan, specifically a self-directed retirement plan? So that's the focus and the aim today. Again, I appreciate you stopping in and joining us, and we'll go ahead and get going here. Quick disclaimer, as with any presentation we give, the Entrust Group, Entrust does not provide any investment advice or endorse any products. All information and materials are for educational purposes only. All parties are encouraged to consult with their attorneys, accountants, and financial advisors before entering into any type of an investment. A little bit about the Entrust Group. We are a self-directed IRA provider and have been for the last 30 plus years. The niche that we focus on is what we call truly self-directed retirement plans. And what makes that a little bit different, and we'll talk about this a little more in depth in a moment, is that we don't do the standard stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. We don't give people financial advice. We don't tell them what to do with their money. We simply provide a vehicle by which you can invest in what you decide you want to do, which typically in our case would be involving some kind of alternative investments. We have people that invest in things like real estate and private placements and private notes and precious metals. So these are assets that are permissible per the IRS guidelines, but that you generally cannot do through a large bank or brokerage company. So we've been focusing exclusively on self-directed IRAs since 1981. We currently have about $3 billion in assets under administration, and we have a lot of activity that goes on, anywhere between 12,000 to 16,000 client transactions every month. We've got a very knowledgeable staff. We've got our corporate base out of Oakland, California, and then several regional offices scattered throughout the country in different parts, different regions to service our local clients in those regions. And we kind of pride ourselves on education. We obviously, as a self-directed provider, can't tell you what to do with your money, but we can certainly educate you on how self-direction works, what the different alternative options are, and then equip you with the information that you need so that you can make decisions for yourself as to whether or not this is something that's going to be a good fit. We do continued education programs. We teach classes in person. We also do webinars like we're doing today via the web. Quick overview of the agenda. We're going to talk about simply what a self-directed IRA is. We're going to talk about why this has become an increasingly more popular strategy. Relatively speaking, self-direction is a very small portion of the retirement plan industry, but it's becoming increasingly more popular, and we'll talk about why and how that's happening. We'll talk about how to open a self-directed IRA, then how to get money into that account, and then finally how to make an investment through that account. And that really is, in essence, what we do at Entrust. We explain how you can set up an account, shift over some money, direct and purchase the alternative asset that you decide you want to purchase, and then any of the aftermath stuff that is going to involve the administrator that holds that account that owns the alternative investment. And then we'll go through a little checklist of how to open an account and leave plenty of time for Q&A. Speaking of Q&A, as I mentioned at the beginning, feel free to type in questions at any point. You don't have to hold off until the end. I can take those questions throughout the presentation if you have them. So what is a self-directed IRA? Well, first off, I'd like to define the fact that self-directed is a descriptive term. That's a term that the industry has created to kind of define the types of accounts that we administer. The types of accounts that we administer are IRAs predominantly. We do a little bit with 401ks. We do some individual 401ks and some of those types of plans, but predominantly we're an IRA provider. And at its core, an IRA is an IRA. A traditional IRA with Entrust is really fundamentally no different than a traditional IRA with a bank or a brokerage company. Same with a Roth or a SEP or a Simple. The difference is the way that they're handled. Most companies historically that have been in the retirement plan space have gone with the model of advising people on what to do with their money. The term that's used is fiduciary. They take on a fiduciary role in the sense that they take your money, they give you advice, they make investments, they charge commission for the advice and for doing the investments. That makes up the vast majority of retirement plan administrators in the country right now. Where we are different is that we allow the client to determine what they do. When we talk about self-directed, the client is the self in the self-directed arrangement. And literally everything that transpires on the account is controlled by the client. You could think of us as kind of educated, responsive order takers. All we do is process the investments that our clients specifically direct us to process. We are facilitators at the request of the client to do whatever it is the client decides they want to do. The benefit of this structure is that you're not limited to what a lot of the banks and brokerage companies will limit you to. And by that I mean you don't have to just buy stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, and CDs. You can do an array of different things, including investment real estate. You can buy private notes, private stock, precious metals, oil and gas, all kinds of different things that maybe aren't available to you with where you are right now. So when we mention here that you're not locked into the investments that are offered through the big banks or brokerage firms, that lock-in is not necessarily an intentional lock-in, but inherently that's going to be the case. If you go to a company that sells securities, they are going to allow you to buy securities. They're not going to allow you to buy real estate for two reasons. One is they aren't compensated for selling real estate. You have to have a realtor license to make money by selling real estate. A securities license isn't going to work. Secondly, just the nature of a real estate transaction is fundamentally different than buying a stock. If you have a brokerage company and you want to buy a stock or a mutual fund, they can do that for you by clicking a mouse. If you want to buy a piece of real estate, it's quite a bit more involved, and you really have to have kind of the infrastructure in place to do it and do it quickly and easily and fairly cost effectively. And that's what we've built here at Entrust, is that we're not trying to compete with the big banks and brokerage firms in stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. What we're competing with are the other companies that do self-directed IRAs. And again, what we have in place is a mechanism by which it's very easy for us to do alternative assets. So it's very much of a niche business. We don't try to do everything for everybody. We basically focus on what we do and do really well, which is hold alternative assets. It's important to understand that any IRA is going to be governed by the rules that apply to IRAs. That's going to be true for self-directed retirement plans in the same way it would be for a bank or a brokerage account. So again, to recap, an IRA is an IRA. Self-directed is a descriptive term that allows you to basically control your own retirement plan and do alternative investments within that retirement plan. Why is this becoming more popular? Well, I think quite frankly because people, A, are becoming more aware of the fact that they can do it, and B, they're looking for diversification. We all remember what happened in 2008, 2009 when the market took a big dip. The bottom line is if you had all of your money in the market, it doesn't really matter if it's spread out into different investments within the market. If the market takes a 50% dip, your entire portfolio is going to go down in value. So most financial planners talk about diversification. The problem is within a retirement plan, often you cannot diversify outside of just your standard stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. What we talk about typically is true diversification, getting your investments into what we call non-correlated assets. And by that I mean stuff that's not directly tied to the Dow Jones Industrial Average. So if you buy a rental property, for example, and it's bringing in income every month that exceeds your expenses, so it's cash flowing, that's not going to be in any way affected by what's going on in the stock market. Same could be said true about maybe a private note or a private stock investment to some degree. Precious metals sometimes don't necessarily flow directly with the market. So these are things that are non-correlated that you can hold within a retirement plan to provide a greater degree of diversification with all the same tax benefits that you would have with the standard IRA. The essence of an IRA is that you don't pay taxes on the growth within the retirement plan. It's tax deferred, or in some cases like a Roth, it can be seen as tax free under a certain situation. So what you have there is that you have the ability to maintain the tax benefits but do investments that you know, that you understand, that are maybe outside the box of what you're limited to with your standard bank or brokerage company. That's what we're providing as a self-directed IRA provider. As far as how this works, it's pretty simple. There are three core steps involved in the process. The first step is to establish an account. You really can't do anything constructive in the way of making an investment or signing a contract or doing anything on a paper until you open an InTrust account. So the very first step, once you've done all your due diligence, you've maybe called up a local business development manager or called the toll-free number out in Oakland, you talk to somebody, you feel like you're confident this is what you want to do, the first step to actually move forward is to establish the new account. To do that, it's pretty simple. We have an application packet that you can download from our website or we can email to you. It's a matter of filling out some information about who you are, a little bit about your beneficiary, the person that would inherit the IRA, a few signature pages, and then a fee schedule. You complete that, you send it back to us either by email, fax, or mail, along with a copy of your driver's license, and that'll be what we need to open the new account. With the technology we built in, it doesn't take us very long to open an account. We can do it in one day with no problem. Second step is typically to get money into that account. And there are three ways to do that. You can do a transfer, a rollover, or a contribution. A transfer would be when you're moving IRA funds from an IRA with another company to the newly established IRA with InTrust. A transfer is going to be initiated with our paperwork that you send in to us. It's an IRA transfer request form. You complete it, send it to InTrust. InTrust signs it, sends it out to your current IRA custodian. Your current custodian then, per that request, will send the money over to InTrust as an IRA to IRA transfer. Transfers are not reportable or taxable. You just move money simply from Company A to Company B. You can do that as often as you like. There's full portability of IRA to IRA transfers. So if you've got IRAs at different companies, you want to move some of them to us, we can handle that for you via the IRA transfer request. The other way to move money from a retirement plan would be a rollover. And typically what we see with a rollover is money coming out of some kind of qualified plan. It may be a 401k from your previous employer or a 403b or a 457. So you worked for a company, you had a retirement plan, you left that company. At that point then you can roll that money out to an IRA with the company of your choice. And in this case, if it's with InTrust, you can roll it directly to the InTrust account. So that would be considered a rollover. A transfer is IRA to IRA. Rollover is qualified plan to IRA. Third way to get money into an InTrust account would be to make a contribution. And depending on the type of account you have and where you're at as far as your age and your eligibility, you can determine how much you can add to your InTrust account each year. Standard IRA contributions for a traditional or Roth would be $5,500. If you're over the age of 50, you can put in an additional what's called a catch-up contribution of $1,000 for a total of $6,500. If you're self-employed, you could look at doing a SEP IRA, a simple IRA, or what's called an individual 401k, and feasibly put in quite a bit more than just the $5,500 you could put into a standard IRA. So we could discuss that. We've got some information on our Learning Center if you want to look at the different types of plans and what maybe would be the best fit for what you're trying to do. But a contribution is simply adding money to a retirement plan. In this case, it would be directly to the InTrust account. Third step then in the self-directed process is for you to go figure out what you want to do. My experience as somebody who's been doing this for a while is typically the client knows what they want to do before they ever really come on board with InTrust. So typically it's just a matter of getting the account set up, getting the money in place, and then processing the investment. But it may be that you want to get the account set up and funded while you're looking for an investment, and that's perfectly fine. There's no timing issues. You can leave the money sit there for a period of time, or you can have us invest the funds immediately. It's totally up to you. But that third step is figuring out what you want to buy and then directing the purchase of that investment. And again, because we don't sell any products, we don't give you any ideas on what to do. We simply provide you with the information on what the options are, in this case anything alternative, real estate, private placements, private notes, or metals, or anything that's maybe not on that list that you want to do, and then direct us to process the investment. So again, from our perspective, we're waiting for you to take the initiative to direct the purchase for the self-directed IRA. We then facilitate that transaction at your direct request. We talked a bit about transfers and rollovers. Transfers IRA to IRA. Rollover would typically be coming out of a qualified plan. This is kind of just recapping that just a little bit. How to invest in real estate. Now, real estate historically has been kind of our bread and butter. We've had more people buy real estate with their self-directed IRA than any other type of alternative asset. So I'll talk just a little bit about how that works because it tends to be a little more relevant to the majority of the people. Now, you may not be interested in real estate. You may be wanting to do a private note or a private stock investment. That's fine. The essence of it's still the same. The only distinction would be what you specifically tell us to buy with the account. But to recap, kind of the first two steps would be to set up an account, shift over money. So once you're in that position, then you go out and find the property. When you put in an offer on the property, it's important that you don't put your name on the contract. You want to think of you and the IRA as separate from one another. You control the IRA, but at its core, the IRA is a separate entity that stands alone by itself. And that entity is the one that's actually acquiring this property. So when you look at the offer and the contract and the closing documents and ultimately the deed, they will all reflect the IRA as the owner of that investment. Your individual retirement account owns that asset. You don't want John Jones on the contract. You want the Entrust Group for the benefit of John Jones' IRA. The paperwork is all going to flow through our office. The money is all going to flow through our office. So you direct it, you control it, we process it at your request. So you make an offer is accepted, you send the contract to Entrust, you direct us to send the earnest deposit if there is an earnest deposit requirement. You then direct Entrust to process the paperwork for the closing with the title company. They're going to prepare everything, send it to us. You're going to review it. If it all looks good, we execute the documents and send the money out to close on the deal. So again, it's all controlled by you as the self-directed account holder, but facilitated by us. Same general principle for something like private stock or real estate, just a different set of documents that would come into our office. There are rules with IRA and 401k investing, and for the most part, when we talk about what you can and cannot do within a retirement plan, we're basically just summarizing what these rules are. These rules were built into the code that was drafted in 74. IRAs came on the scene in 75. The rules for the most part haven't changed. In fact, they haven't changed at all. The essence of what the rules are has not changed in roughly 40 years. What has changed a little bit is we've got a little more clarification from some court cases, a few private letter rulings, some things that the IRS or the Department of Labor have occasionally put out as publications so they can kind of fine-tune some things to give us a little more clarity. But essentially the rules are what the rules are. We don't necessarily impose our own rules on top of this. We just take the IRS rules, try to explain those to our clients so that they can make sure that they adhere to those rules when they self-direct their funds. The prohibited transaction rules come out of IRC 4975. You can Google that if you want. You can go to Learning Center. We've got a lot on 4975. And basically what it says in a nutshell is that you and the IRA are separate, and you shouldn't have transactions between yourself and your retirement plan. Between means you cannot buy, sell, exchange, or lease an asset from yourself to your retirement plan or vice versa. Now these rules apply to you as well as what's called disqualified persons. Disqualified persons are your lineal ascendants and descendants, your spouse and spouses of your children. So these people are considered disqualified persons. What that means is these people cannot have dealings with your IRA. If your mother, who's a direct lineal relative, owns a property, she cannot sell that property to your IRA because by definition your mother is a disqualified person and thereby cannot do a transaction with your IRA. Same thing with your children, your spouse, etc. It does not include siblings, brothers and sisters. It does not include aunts, uncles, cousins, neighbors, friends. If you think of kind of that horizontal relationship, those people are not defined as disqualified persons. It's just direct lineal ascendants and descendants and spouses. Those are the people you need to be concerned about. So the rules state that you cannot buy, sell, exchange, or lease between these people. It also states that these people cannot utilize the assets that the retirement plan owns. And typically that's not an issue because if you buy a mutual fund, you can't really use a mutual fund. But with a property, it's a little bit different. If you've got a property that you bought in a college town, it just so happens your daughter goes to that college, you may be inclined to think, well, maybe my daughter stays in that property. But the rules have actually been crafted such that that's not an option. And a lot of times people ask me like, well, how would anyone ever know? We don't get into that dialogue because obviously the IRS could audit you and they could look into it and that could cause problems. So we don't get into the how would I get caught argument. It's more of just a what are the rules. And we do our best, without being in a fiduciary role, we do our best to look at what you're doing and make sure that there's nothing blatant that's wrong with the transaction, nothing glaringly prohibited about what you're doing. Now, ultimately, again, it's up to you to figure out what the rules are and to make sure that you're following those rules. But if we see that John Doe investor is buying a property from John Doe to John Doe's IRA, we will at least inquire about whether or not those two John Does are the same person. And if they are, being that that would be a prohibited transaction, we would hit the brakes. We would tell the client, you cannot do that transaction because the code would not allow that transaction to take place. It would be prohibited. Now, sometimes there's scenarios that we don't have all the information on, or maybe sometimes clients aren't very forthcoming with the information. It's important to understand kind of where we stop and where you take over. We will, to the best of our ability, look at what you're doing. If you ask us questions and there's a clear answer provided by the code, we will answer those questions. But ultimately, as I said before, you're the self in the self-directed IRA. So you need to understand what these rules are and make sure that you're abiding by these rules. Now, the good thing about the rules is that they're pretty black and white. The IRS doesn't necessarily tell you what you can do. They tell you what you cannot do. And they don't have that many rules. They just have a handful. So basically look at those rules, figure out what you're not allowed to do, and make sure that you're kind of playing in their sandbox, so to speak. Make sure you're not violating any of the few rules that they put in place. Namely, don't do deals with yourself, your kids, your parents, your spouse, and don't utilize the assets that you're buying within the retirement plan. Same applies for you, your kids, your parents, your spouse, etc. Direct lineal relatives, your spouse, spouses of your children, those people are considered disqualified persons. Now, part of what we do at Entrust is we answer a lot of questions. We realize that a lot of what we do is unique. It's foreign to people if they've never done a self-directed IRA. I always encourage people to give us a call. If you've got a potential transaction, you want to run it by us, if it's black and white, we'll answer the questions. If it's a little more in the gray, we'll tell you to consult with your attorney or CPA before moving forward. But if nothing else, get the dialogue going. Ask us a question. We can answer the questions for you to the best of our ability. And that's just part of what we do. It's inherent in our role as a self-directed provider. So if you decide this is something you want to do, the process I mentioned before, the first step would be to set up an account. That's pretty simple. We've got a new account kit you can download from our website, or a local BDM can send it to you via email. You complete that, send it back to us with a clear copy of your driver's license, and we'll establish a new account. We do need the ID because of the Patriot Act and all the regulatory stuff that we have to follow. We do need a clear copy of your driver's license with the forms, but that can be sent to us by email or fax, or you can drop it in the mail. The transfer or rollover, the paperwork is going to be contingent upon whether it's a transfer or a rollover. A transfer is initiated with our paperwork that you send to us. We then go and send it to the current custodian. A rollover, 9 times out of 10, is going to be initiated with paperwork from the company that's sending the rollover. So if you left your old job a couple months ago and your money is still sitting in a 401k with the old provider, you're going to need to go contact them and get their paperwork instructing them to send the money over to the newly created IRA with Entrust. When you look at our application, you'll see a general fee disclosure. There's actually 2 different options. We realize that everybody's not in the same situation. Some people are going to move over money and buy 1 investment or 2. Some people are going to move over money and buy 10 investments. So we don't try to peg everybody into the same situation. We allow you to pick from either an asset-based fee option or a value-based fee option. And it's all documented. It's all very clear. There's no hidden fees. There's nothing wrapped into what we do. It's all very clearly laid out on the general fee disclosure. And that's part of what you're going to complete when you fill out the application. It's a required item to set up an account. So the per asset per year, you would just pay us a flat fee of roughly $295 plus a few transaction fees here or there to acquire 1 investment, $295 per asset per year. The value-based option, again, is based on the value, so depending on the value, it's going to go up or down based on what you move over to your interest account. A little hard to quote on a webinar. The best thing to do is probably download the fee schedule from our website. Take a look at it. If you've got questions, call us. We can clarify any questions that you have. Now, typically, there's a one-time $50 account opening fee to establish an account. There's some hard costs to us to open an account, plus the paperwork and everything that we have involved. So we charge $50 to establish a brand new IRA at Entrust. For the next couple of months, we're actually waiving that $50 account setup fee, and I'll talk about this in just a moment. We've got a coupon that, again, you can download from our website or we can email to you, that if you're doing either a transfer or rollover, we will waive the one-time $50 account setup fee. I've been with the company for a long time, and I can tell you that Q1 is the only time we do this special. Once it's done, it's done. The rest of the year, if you want to open an account, it is going to cost you $50 to open up that account. So if you're interested, maybe you're on the fence about moving forward, it might be a good time to do that to save yourself that $50 setup fee. Going forward then, obviously, you're going to pick out the investment. You're going to direct us to process the investment through a form. It's an internal form that we call a bi-direction letter. And we actually have different types of bi-direction letters based on the different types of asset classes that we have. So things like real estate, you're going to fill out a bi-direction letter for real estate. If it's a private note, it's going to be a bi-direction letter for a note. If it's a private stock investment, it'll be a bi-direction letter for a private stock investment. And we did that just to kind of streamline things and make it a little bit easier to fill out those forms. But that's part of the process in working with Entrust, is that you've got accessibility to people that can help you out with this paperwork, that can answer your questions related to the paperwork, and just kind of help shepherd you through a little bit. You're still going to be the one driving the bus, so to speak, but if you tell us where you want to go, we can at least give you the paperwork that we need to make that happen. Speaking of the coupon, here's a copy of it. Again, you can download it from our website. As long as you're doing either a transfer or a rollover, and we get the application and a coupon by April 15, 2015, so you've got about 3 months left of this special, we will waive the one-time $50 account setup fee. So literally you can get into the account with no upfront cost. Then moving forward, all you're going to pay us for is the transactions we facilitate and the assets that we hold. So this is a great time of year, again, if you've been kicking around for a while, to go ahead and pull the trigger and make the account setup happen. If you have questions about this, you can go to our website, theentrustgroup.com/moveyourIRA. That's the special that we're running right now. And again, I don't want it to be like a, when you go to the boot camps and they say today only type thing, but I can tell you that it will expire on April 15th, and anytime after April 15th, we are going to cut off that special. So if you're interested, now's the time to pull the trigger. Go ahead and set up the account, send us in a coupon along with the transfer or the rollover, and we will waive that $50 account establishment fee. We've reached a point in the presentation where we're going to open it up to questions. I've got a couple of questions that have come in so far during the presentation, but if you're a little bit confused on something, if you want some clarity, if you have a specific question on something that you're looking to do with the self-directed IRA, now would be the time to do that. On the bottom left corner of your screen, you should see a chat option. You can type in the question. It'll pop up in my inbox. I'll read the question aloud and then provide an answer to it. First question that I had from a little bit earlier in the presentation was time frames. How long does each step in the three-step process take? And it's a fantastic question. I appreciate you bringing it up because it's important. The first step is pretty quick. Setting up an account, literally if the paperwork's in good order, we're talking about half a day to get an account set up. It really doesn't take us very long to establish an account, assign you an account number, and provide that information to you. What does take a little bit of time is getting the money over to us by either transfer or rollover. And unfortunately, that's the step that takes the most amount of time. It's also the step that's completely out of our hands. If we send paperwork to your current provider, there's really nothing we can do to force that transfer to happen quickly. If the paperwork's in good order, they should get us the money in roughly 4 to 6 business days. But it may take them 2 weeks. It may take them 3 weeks. It may take them 1 day. It totally varies depending on the provider that's sending us the money and their volume and their turn time. So as you're gauging when to send paperwork for each step, keep that in mind. The account application we can do very quickly. The transfer or the rollover, that's going to take up the most amount of time. Once the money's here, you provide us with the investment direction forms and everything's in good order, you're looking at roughly 1 to 2 days. Now, a complicated real estate transaction could take 2 to 3 days, but generally speaking, if the paperwork's in good order and it's all submitted to us accordingly, we try to move very quickly. We don't like to be the party that's slowing down the transaction. We try to move very quickly, and our general turn time on that's about 1 to 2 business days, varying a little bit depending on the investment and the unique nature of what you're doing. But again, in the whole big spectrum, the part that takes the most amount of time is getting the money into the account with us. There's a question here about what should I look for in the entity that I'm interested in investing, and I can kind of answer that in a roundabout way. It's kind of bleeding a little more into like financial advice as far as what to look for and what you're doing. Now, if you're asking us like what types of investments you could hold with the self-directed IRA, we're very happy to answer that question. You can buy real estate, you can buy into an LLC, you could buy into a private C Corp, you could lend money through an IRA, you could buy precious metals. These are all general things that we can answer. If you're looking at an investment, you're kind of looking for somebody to scrub the document and see if it's a quote-unquote good investment, that would be something outside of Entrust. That would be a financial advisor, a CPA, an attorney. They would review the merit of the investment, the merit of the document supporting the investment, and basically provide their expertise as to whether or not you should proceed. From our perspective, we don't do that, and it's really something that makes us truly self-directed in nature. And it's important to understand that there's a good reason why we don't do that, namely because we're not necessarily licensed to do that. We're not financial advisors. We don't play the role of financial advisors or attorneys or CPAs. So we will do what you tell us to do when you tell us to do it, but you're the one figuring out what that something is. Hopefully that answered the question okay. If not, feel free to elaborate a little bit and I can definitely answer it a little more in depth. This is a question about fees, and again, the fee schedule is out on our website, but there's a question about what a transaction costs. Depends on the type of transaction. If it's a real estate transaction, the typical cost on that's $125 for us to facilitate the real estate purchase, for us to work with the closing agent, sign off on the paperwork, do all the stuff that we need to do to acquire the property. If it's not real estate, if it's something like a private note or maybe a private stock investment, the fee is $95 to do a transaction. So it's not an absorbent amount of money for us to do a transaction, but obviously it's a hard cost to us to take the time, energy, and effort, make sure that we're executing it appropriately, and so we do get compensated to do a transaction. So $95 for something non-real estate, $125 for something real estate related. Other questions here. Let's see if we got any other ones that came in during the presentation. There's a question about do we have information on the different types of plans that can be self-directed? The answer to that is absolutely. Our marketing team does a great job of putting out a lot of good information both in PDF form as well as on our website and the Learning Center. You know, what is a traditional IRA? What is a Roth IRA? What's a SEP IRA? What are the contribution limits for different types of plans? We have all that information. Again, it's general information, but we try to package it, put it in the same place so you kind of have a one-stop shop for anything that you would need to explore the option of a self-directed retirement plan. Question here is, to what extent can one direct an IRA online, comparing it to online banking? I assume you're referring that like to pay an expense related to an investment or something along those lines. We have some technology features. I'll kind of answer in a long-winded way of saying, you know, this is what we've done historically, this is what we have now, and there's some other peripheral things that maybe you could look at. Historically, if you wanted to get something done with your account, you would fill out a form. For example, if you're paying an expense, you'd fill out a payment authorization letter. You'd fill that out, send it in to us with a copy of the invoice by either email or fax. We would then cut a check within a day or two out to pay the invoice. More recently, we've developed a program called the My Direction Card. And the aim of the My Direction Card is to give you the ability to pay for expenses related to an IRA-owned asset directly with a card, like a point-of-sale purchase, and then electronically verify that transaction after the fact through an online portal. So it kind of puts you in the position of doing the expense part first and then telling us what the expense is related to, as opposed to sending us a form, having us cut a check to pay for the expense. There's also a technique specific to real estate generally where people will utilize an LLC, and I won't go into it in depth, but it's a technique where you take your IRA, you put it into an LLC, you then appoint yourself controller over the same LLC, and you thereby have what's considered checkbook control over the entity that's owned by the IRA. There's some PDFs and some literature on the website about that. It's not an investment structure that we in any way suggest or endorse or recommend. It is one, though, that we allow for our clients that want to do that structure. We allow our clients to set that up. So by doing so, instead of coming to us to have documents signed or money sent out or income coming back, you would do it all through the LLC. From our perspective, we would hold an account that owns the LLC, but wouldn't be involved in the day-to-day processing of anything related to that investment. Here's another good question. It says, can I open an account now but wait until we have a real estate transaction before transferring the cash? The answer is absolutely. You can open up an account at any time. There are no minimum account balances. You don't necessarily have to fund your account right away. The one thing I will kind of note as an asterisk, though, is you're going to want to plan accordingly based on timing of when you're going to need the funds in the account. What I've seen, which is somewhat frustrating, is sometimes the deal is ready to go, but the money's not here yet. So if your money is out there at a brokerage firm and you need to get it over to Entrust so that we can write an earnest deposit check, we can't send out money that we don't have. So what you may consider doing is setting up the account, getting over a little bit of money, so that if the right deal pops up, we can write an earnest deposit, maybe $500, $1,000, $2,000, whatever it may be, and then as you're putting together the deal and moving to closing, move over the rest of the money. That way you're not sitting on a bunch of cash doing nothing, but you're also not going to get in a situation where you get the cart in front of the horse and the deal is ready to go and there's no money. I mean, if your money's out at a brokerage company and we send them paperwork, there's nothing we can do to force them to send us the money. So you don't want a deal to fall apart because there's no money in your account. On the other side, I understand that you may not want to move money over until you find the right deal. So that's kind of the game that you need to play on timing to figure out what's going to be best for what you're trying to do. If you're looking to do a quick close, I would definitely recommend having the account set up with money ready to go. You know, if you want to go to the seller and say, I'll close in a week, you don't want to then try to scramble and get your money moved over by transfer or rollover in a week because it may not happen. But if your money's here and you provide us with the correct documentation to do the deal, there's no problem with us closing in a couple of days. Here's a question here. Can I be a partner on a purchase of property with my checkbook control Roth IRA? I'm going to answer that in two ways. One is, can you partner yourself with your IRA? And the answer to that is yes. If you're partnering on a new acquisition and it's clear that you own a portion and your IRA owns a portion, that percentage split is established on day one and maintained for the life of the investment, whether it's 50-50, 80-20, whatever. You put that in play, you keep it consistent. It's like two legal owners going into the same investment at the same time on split ownership. That works. Second side of that with the checkbook IRA, what this gentleman's referring to is the LLC structure, where you take your IRA, put it into an LLC, and the LLC buys the real estate. That too would work with a partnership, again, assuming it's a new acquisition. You're putting together the split ownership. Each party is bringing the allocated portion of their purchase amount. By that I mean if it's, say, 50-50, for example, each party is bringing 50% of the purchase price to the table. You want to make sure it's done on a cost basis and following the percentages that are on the document. But if you do that, there's nothing wrong with partnering alongside your retirement plan to make an investment. As I mentioned at the early part of the presentation, you cannot exchange, you can't buy, sell, exchange, or lease between your retirement plan. So I can't take something I own and sell it to my IRA or vice versa. But me as an individual and my IRA as a separate entity can go into the same investment at the same time on split ownership, tenants in common, and that would work. Another question is, can I sell a house and put it into an IRA or a Roth IRA? I'm not sure I totally follow the question. I think what you're saying is if you own a property now, could you sell that and then turn around and then buy it with your IRA? My answer to that would be a bad idea to do that in a very short time frame, because if you own the property now and you say sell it to your friend and then turn around and buy it back with your IRA in a short period of time, it's going to look like you were trying to do something indirectly that you weren't allowed to do directly. The code says you can't take a property from you and get it into your IRA. So buffering it through a friend, for example, wouldn't necessarily alleviate the rules. You're just kind of circling around the rules. And the way the code is drafted, it says what you cannot do directly, you should not do indirectly. So you'd want to be careful about that. Now, if you've got a property in mind that you don't own or control, you want to buy it as an acquisition for the IRA, there's no problem with that. But if you own a property right now that's owned by you personally or by a corporation that you control, there really is no legitimate way to get that into your IRA. When you look at the essence of the IRA rules, that's really what they're trying to prevent. So there's a reason why those rules are in place, and for all intents and purposes, you should probably abide by those rules because you don't really want to play with the IRS. The bottom line with the IRS, they would have to audit you to find it, but if they audit you, they assume you're guilty until you prove you're not. So if you did do something that violated one of their rules, the chances of you getting out of that unscathed are going to be very slim. I've over the years of being in the self-directed IRA industry, just the IRA industry in general, I've kind of grown to have a healthy fear of the IRS, only because they hold all the chips. It's their rules. They set the guidelines. They accuse you of being guilty until on your dime and your time you can prove that you're not. So for my 2 cents, follow the guidelines, understand what they are, and don't break any of the prohibited transaction rules because it's just not worth the risk. Another question here is how does the client I think what it's asking here is about buying a property at auction. If you're going to buy a property from the county or, like a trust deed sale or something like that, how does that happen? It gets a little bit tricky from a timing perspective. Obviously, if you called us up at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday and said, I need a wire by noon, we can't quite work that quickly. There's too many things that have to happen for that to happen. So that's not really feasible to do it directly. The 2 ways that I've seen people make investments very quickly. One is by utilizing the My Direction card. And again, that gives you the ability to acquire the investment first and then provide the documentation second. The other technique is that LLC structure that some people have gone with, where you put the money from the IRA into the LLC goes out and makes the investment. By doing so, the LLC manager would be able to make the investment at point of sale without our involvement. The other, third option would be if you know for sure you're going to make an acquisition through that county or through that auction company and you want us to cut a check in advance of something maybe equal to or above what you plan on paying. Let's say, for example, you want to buy some tax liens and you know you're not going to spend more than $15,000. You could come to Entrust a few days in advance, have us cut a check or a cashier's check to the county for that tax lien auction, go out bid, and then if there's any discrepancy between what you have with them and what you need, or if you maybe overfunded, have them send the money back. But it gets a little bit tricky. When we do transactions, we try to move as quickly as we can, but we also try to emphasize that there are certain things that we have to do to make sure that everything's in place. I generally tell people if we're asking for something, it's because it's relevant and because it's needed in the file before we wire out your money. So sometimes in those situations with those super fast turn times, you got to get a little creative in the way you structure your account or the investment. There's a question here about whether or not Entrust is an administrator or custodian. Are you a one-stop shop? We are a one-stop shop. If you look at technically we're an IRA administration company. We've been in operation for 33 years. The key relationship here, though, is with Entrust. If there's a custodian behind the scenes doing something, we want to make sure that you understand that there's no discrepancy between like who you're setting up an account with. You're setting up an account with the Entrust group. Your relationship with the Entrust group, all of your transactions are going to be administered by the Entrust group. If there's a custodian in the picture kind of behind the scenes, that's not going to impact your account in any way. This is something we never used to really address because it was a non-issue, but it's become more of an issue where people have brought up what's a custodian, what's an administrator. We could talk about that offline if you want to get in detail. I think there's pros and cons of both structures. I think at the end of the day what you want to know is who is my relationship with? Who am I dealing with to set up an account, shift over money, make an investment, and all the stuff that comes after that? Who's my point of contact? And one of the things that makes Entrust very unique is that we're a large company that's been doing this a long time with a lot of assets, but we also have some regional offices. And the regional offices, for all intents and purposes, are kind of the go-between between the client and the corporate office for the people in that region. So by having a regional office, you can kind of streamline everything through one point of contact or one office, and then that gives you the same person to work with on everything start to finish. Now, if you're a house account and you're dealing with Oakland, we've got a team of what we call our customer service reps that do everything related to our house account. So you still have a team of people to back you up. But our regional model, in my mind, and I'm a little biased here, but in my mind I think is a very good model because you've got a big corporate backing, a lot of stuff in place, good company, it's been doing it a long time, but you also kind of have that one-to-one connection where you can build on those relationships and those conversations and kind of just streamline things through the same point of contact on everything. Excuse me. I think I've got all the questions, and we're running up here at about the time frame I was trying to stick to. Excuse me. I'd like to go ahead and kind of give last call for any questions that might come in if you have any other questions or thoughts or comments. The other thing I'm going to do is put up my contact information here. I'm a regional director. Geographically located in St. Louis, Missouri. I handle most of what comes out of the Central Time Zone. We've got offices out on the East Coast, a couple over on the West Coast, and our corporate base out in Oakland, California. I'm available at this number that you see on the screen pretty much anytime during working hours. Try to get me after working hours. You can try me on my cell phone as well. We try to be as accessible as possible, and we're certainly here to answer any questions that you have. At the end of the day, we can't tell you what to do, but we can certainly answer your questions about the different options that are out there and explain how self-direction works. So obviously, feel free to contact us if we can help in any way. Looks like I had a couple of questions come in. We're right at about 45, 46 minutes into the presentation. So if you need to log off, go ahead and log off. I'm going to go ahead and stay online and answer these few other questions that have come in. But if you need to shut down, just go ahead and X out of the browser and that'll take you out of the presentation. Another question that came in was about timing of taking distributions. How easy and timely is it to take an IRA distribution? We try to make it as easy and timely as possible. We've got papers that you can fill out called an IRA distribution that you can fax or email in. We try to get the distribution out within 1 to 2 days. We also have the My Direction card, which we can set up with distribution options. So we can actually load a card with IRA funds that you could then point of sale purchase at an ATM or at the movie theater or at the grocery store, and it would be coded as an IRA distribution. So if you're of distribution age, 59.5 or older, and you want to set up the card's free. We don't charge anything for it, so it's a very easy way to get quick access to your retirement plan money. There's a question about, is it more difficult to get a loan on a real estate transaction? The answer to that is yes, it is. If you get a loan to purchase a property through a retirement plan, the loan has to be what's called non-recourse. And non-recourse means you don't personally guarantee the debt. The loan is made to your retirement plan. Your retirement plan is responsible for paying back that debt. Typically when you borrow money from a bank, they're going to want to wrap in a personal guarantee. They want you to sign on the dotted line promising to repay the bank. With a non-recourse loan, there is no personal guarantee. We keep a list of banks that we know of that do non-recourse loans. And if you want to email me, I can send you back a list of, we've got 12 to 13 banks nationwide that do non-recourse loans. You could always try a local community bank or credit union. They may be able to do that for you. But it is a little bit different than your standard bank financing, and you're going to have to find a bank that's willing to do the non-recourse loan to get that done. But they're out there. They do exist. And to me, it's kind of unique that you can actually buy something that's more expensive than what you have. You can't do that with stock. You could with real estate if you get a non-recourse loan, so it's something to consider. I think the last question I have here, and then I'll wrap up, is if you partner with your IRA 50-50, does that mean that everything has to remain 50-50 for the life of the investment? Furthermore, can I use the property 50% of the time? And that's a very good question. I'll answer both parts of it. First part, if I partner with my IRA 50-50, yes, everything has to remain 50-50. That means every expense, every piece of income has to flow in and out 50-50 on everything start to finish. Second part of the question, can I use it for 50% of the year? The answer to that, unfortunately, is no. If your IRA is involved in any capacity, 100%, 50%, 5%, doesn't matter. If the IRA is involved, you and your direct lineal relatives cannot use that property. So you would forfeit your ability to use the property. So if you're looking at a vacation home for you and your family, and you know you want to live in the property or stay in the property for a portion of the year, you don't want to get the IRA involved. Really at its core, an IRA is meant for investment purposes only. So it doesn't matter if you're buying a mutual fund or buying a property. It's an investment on the mutual fund side. It's an investment on the property side. So just think of your IRA as kind of this own special tax-deferred bubble of money. And anything that bubble of money gets involved in is an investment that's going to be held strictly for investment purposes. No personal use or benefit to any of those assets that you're holding. I hope I didn't miss any questions. I had some good questions come in here throughout the presentation. I appreciate that. It certainly adds a lot of content to the presentation. Went a little bit over on time, but that's typical for webinars just because we do get the participation from the attendees, which is good, and that's why we do these webinars. I'd encourage you once again to go to our website and go to the Learning Center, go to theentrustgroup.com. if you're looking for information from a business development manager, you can call me, or you can call our 800 number out in Oakland, California, and talk to somebody that knows a little bit about self-directed IRAs that can answer your questions. So I appreciate the time and appreciate you joining us today. Thank you, and I look forward to talking to you soon or answering questions in the future. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon.